The snow didn't fall gently that night. It came fast and thick, blanketing the city in a hush that silenced even the hum of late-night traffic. Streetlights glowed like low-burning lanterns, casting long shadows through the storm. The world looked like a forgotten painting, beautiful and cold. David Mercer didn't usually drive himself, not anymore. But when the cold crawled under his skin and sleep refused to come, slipped into his black SUV and drove without destination. His assistant would call it reckless. His board would call it absurd. But David didn't care. He had money. He had power, but nights like this reminded him of something he couldn't name. He turned onto Loring Avenue, his headlights sweeping across shuttered shops and snow-covered benches. That's when he saw her. A figure curled up on a wooden bench outside a closed diner, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Her coat was threadbare, her shoes soaked through, a faded nurse's badge clipped to her chest. Read Lila B. David slowed, pulled over, and sat behind the wheel for a moment, unsure why his heart had started to hammer. He stepped out. The cold bit hard, but he walked toward her anyway. She didn't hear him at first. Her head was lowered, eyes barely open. "Hey," he said gently, "are you all right?" Her head snapped up. She blinked at him, startled. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her lips trembled and her voice cracked. "Just waiting for the next bus." "There's no bus coming tonight," David replied. "Everything's shut down. Roads are barely passable. I can figure it out," she said, straightening up. She tried to sound sure, but the shiver in her bones betrayed her. He shrugged off his coat and held it out. "Put this on," she hesitated. "I don't know you." "I know, but that doesn't mean I'm leaving you here to freeze." Something in his voice, calm, certain, without demand, made her pause. She looked at the coat, then at him. Then, finally, she reached out and took it. It swallowed her frame. She tucked her chin into the collar, eyes closing briefly at the warmth. "I can take you somewhere warm," he said. "Even just for the night. There's no agenda, no pressure. You're a stranger, so are you. But I have heat, food, and a guest room. You can lock the door if that makes it easier." She looked down the empty street, then back at the man who didn't look like he belonged in a snowstorm tall, sharp suit beneath a wool scarf, hair dusted with snow. "Fine," she said, the word barely audible. David opened the passenger door. She climbed in silently. The heater was blasting. She held her hands out to the vent, her fingers raw from cold. As they pulled away, the windows slowly cleared, revealing the glittering skyline behind falling snow. "Lila," she said softly, finally offering a name. "David," he replied. "You hungry?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I think I'm just tired." He nodded, eyes on the road. "Let's fix that first." His apartment wasn't what she expected, not marble and gold. It was high up. Yes, all windows, soft lights, but it felt quiet, real. He led her to the guest room, clean clothes in the closet, bathrooms through there. "I'll make something warm." "You cook?" Gave a tired smile. "Sometimes." 15 minutes later, Leela stepped into the kitchen wearing a sweatshirt that hung to her knees. She paused in the doorway. David stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring something in a small pot. "What are you making?" Soupy said. Just the kind that comes in a can. Sorry, no Michelin star tonight." "Canned soup sounds like magic right now." He handed her a bowl and spoon. She sat at the counter, slowly sipping. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was something gentler, like the snow outside. "You didn't have to stop," she said finally. "Most people wouldn't have. I'm not most people." She tilted her head. "Why did you stop?" He didn't answer right away, just looked at her eyes, unreadable. And he said quietly, "You look like someone I used to know." Lila didn't ask who. She just nodded. When she finished, he took the bowl from her and gestured toward the hallway. "You should sleep. It's late." She stood slowly. "Thanks again." "Really?" He nodded once. "No problem." Leela lay awake that night in a bed softer than anything she'd known. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind. She didn't know what to make of David Mercer. He had the bearing of someone important. His apartment, his calmness, the way he made room for silence, it was all unusual. But what stuck with her most was this. He hadn't tried to charm her. He hadn't made her feel small. He just showed up, and tonight that was enough. The morning came without apology, casting golden streaks across the city's skyline. Leela woke slowly, surrounded by silence, so soft it felt unfamiliar. No distant sirens, no upstairs neighbors arguing, no alarm clock blaring in her ear, just warmth. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the folded blanket at the foot of the bed, the oversized sweatshirt she wore, and the faint scent of coffee drifting in from beyond the door. David Mercer's apartment. The memory returned. Snow. Soup. The offer she never expected to accept. She sat up slowly, wary of intruding on a space that didn't belong to her. Still, the sheets were clean, the room was simple, and everything about it felt safe. She walked into the kitchen barefoot. David was already there, hair still damp from a shower, sleeves rolled, reading something on a tablet. He looked up the moment she entered. "Morning," he said, setting it down. "How'd you sleep?" She blinked, unsure how to answer. "Too well, I think." He poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. "No rush to leave," he added. "If you need a ride to work, I'll take you." She hesitated. "I don't want to overstay." "You're not. Besides," he looked at her more closely, "you're still exhausted." She opened her mouth to protest, but paused. "I've been doing back-to-back shifts. My feet might never forgive me." David smiled. "Nursing." "Right," she nodded. "Home care. It doesn't pay much, but I like it." There was something soft in the way he looked at her then. "You help people when no one's looking. That's rare." She looked down, uncomfortable under the praise. "I just do what I can." They sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping coffee, listening to the hum of the city waking up below them. "Why were you driving around in a snowstorm?" she asked suddenly, tilting her head. "You don't seem like the reckless type." David took a beat before answering. "Couldn't sleep?" "Still doesn't explain it." He shrugged. "I drive when my thoughts won't shut up." Lila watched him carefully, sensing something deeper behind his words. "Does that happen a lot?" His eyes flickered. "Sometimes." Later that morning, he dropped her off at the corner near her apartment. She turned to him just before getting out. "Thanks for everything. Really. Anytime," he said simply. She stepped out, but just as she reached the curb, he leaned over and called out, "Leela." She turned back. "You have my number," he said. "If you ever need anything." She nodded slowly, unsure why her chest tightened at that. "Take care, David." Days passed. Lila didn't expect to see him again. Why would a man like David Mercer cross paths with someone like her twice? But life, unpredictable as ever, had other plans. It was a Wednesday evening when she walked out of the nursing home, rain coming down in light sheets. Her umbrella had broken the week before, and she didn't have money to replace it. She ducked under an awning, shivering. Then, a sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. The window rolled down. "David, you really don't own a decent coat, do you?" Lila blinked. "What are you doing here?" "I had a meeting nearby." He gestured toward the passenger side. "Need a lift?" She hesitated, teeth chattering, then sighed and climbed in. "Let me guess," he said, handing her a towel from the back seat. "Didn't want to splurge on a $12 umbrella?" She gave him a look. $12 feeds me for a day and a half." He paused, watching her dry her hair. "Ever thought about working somewhere else?" She arched an eyebrow. "What, like for you?" "Not exactly. But I do know people who need home care nurses, privately. It's paid better, more flexible hours." "Why would you do that for me?" David looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. "Because I want to," he said. That night, they stopped for dinner, just takeout in the car. No fancy restaurants, no agenda. Just conversations that drifted from favorite books to childhood memories, to the strange emptiness that comes with growing up fast. Lila surprised herself by laughing freely, eyes crinkling when David described a failed attempt to bake a birthday cake at age 13 that exploded in the oven. "You were a disaster," she said, covering her mouth. "I was," he agreed. "Still am, in the kitchen. You have staff. Why do you even try?" He shrugged. "'Cause sometimes I want to feel like a real person." I silenced her. After a pause, she asked, "Do you always try to save people?" "No," he said. Quietly, just the ones who don't realize they're worth saving. By the third week, they'd fallen into a quiet rhythm. Late-night check-ins, coffee runs, conversations that wandered into personal territory without permission. But one evening, everything shifted. Lila had picked up an extra shift covering for a sick coworker. She hadn't eaten all day. Her phone had died. The weight of exhaustion pressed against her skull like a vice. David had been texting her. She hadn't replied. When she didn't answer her door, he panicked. He drove straight to the facility, found her collapsed in the staff lounge, pale and barely conscious. He carried her into his car without asking permission. When she woke up in his apartment later that night, wrapped in blankets, she found him pacing the living room like a man, barely holding it together. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked the second she stirred. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said weakly. "I just passed out." "Exactly. That's the problem." Lila sat up, wincing.
"That's David, Nate."
"You can't keep playing rescuer." His jaw clenched. "And you can't keep pretending you don't need anyone." That stung. They stared at each other, neither speaking. Finally, he stepped closer. "Lila, I'm not trying to fix you. I care. More than I should, probably." She felt the tears sting before they fell. "I don't know how to let someone care," she whispered. David reached out, gently brushing her hair from her face. "Then let's learn together." The days that followed were different. Not louder, not brighter. It's just closer. Lila didn't move in. There was no dramatic shift in address or declarations of love whispered under candlelight. But something had shifted. Now, David sent her lunch. To her workplace quietly, no name on the delivery slip. Now, Lila left small handwritten notes on his desk when she stopped by, reminders to eat, or sleep, or just breathe. They didn't define what was between them, but neither of them tried. To stop it, either David had known power, he'd known wealth, but he'd never known softness the way Lila brought it, like warmth, poured slowly over old scars, until the knock came. It was a Thursday. The sky was bruised with clouds. Lila had stayed over the night before, after a rare movie night on the couch. She was in the kitchen, barefoot and humming as she prepared eggs too loudly. David would later think for someone who once barely spoke at all. Then the doorbell rang. David opened it, expecting a courier or maybe his assistant instead. It was him, Lila's ex, a man with charm in his grin and cruelty in his eyes. His clothes were expensive, but they hung on him like a disguise that didn't quite fit. "You're David Mercer," the man said, confident. David didn't answer. "I've been looking for Lila," the man added, stepping forward. David's frame filled the doorway. "She's not available." A scoff.
"Ow."
"She always has this habit of disappearing. Doesn't know how to answer a simple message." Behind him, Lila appeared in the hallway. Her face went still the moment she saw him. David turned to her. "Do you want me to send him away?" She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded once, "Please." But her ex had already noticed her. "Lila, come on, you're seriously living here now." "What is this charity?" David's expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes grew darker. Dangerous. "She's not yours to insult," he said quietly. The man laughed. "You think I care about your little feelings? Just came to get what she owes me. She doesn't owe you anything." "She owes me everything," the man snapped. "Paid her rent for months. Helped her through school. Think she survived out here by herself?" Lila stepped forward then, voice quiet but firm. "You paid my rent so you could control me," she said. "You left me broke, alone, and scared. I don't owe you closure. I don't owe you an explanation. And I sure as hell don't owe you a second of my peace." Her ex's mouth opened to argue, but David had already stepped between them. "Leave," he said, "now." The man looked between them, calculating, amused. Then finally, with a shrug, he turned and walked away. The door shut. Silence filled the room again. Lila's hands were trembling. David reached for her, but stopped short. "Can I?" She nodded. He wrapped her in his arms. She let out a shaky breath she didn't know she was holding. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You didn't ask for that." "No," he said gently. "But I asked for you. All of you. Past. Included." That night, they sat on the floor of his living room, neither wanting to talk about what happened. So they didn't. They just sat and shared quiet, sipping tea, fingers occasionally brushing, until Lila broke the silence. "I used to think love had to hurt," she said softly, "'cause that's all I'd ever known." David's heart ached. "I used to think love had to be earned," he replied. "Like a promotion or a prize." She turned to him, and now he looked at her the way one looks at something they never thought they'd be allowed to keep. "Now I think love is showing up. Over and over. Even when it's snowing. Even when you're scared." Lila reached out, her fingers grazing his. David, what are we doing?" He leaned into her touch. "Something terrifying." She laughed, then kissed him. Not desperate, not rushed, just real. 6 months later, it was spring when she moved in. Not out of necessity, but because it felt right. They planted flowers in tiny pots on his balcony, Lila swearing she'd never kept anything alive that didn't come with a heartbeat. David cooked more. Lila danced while washing dishes. Silence between them now was filled with comfort. One evening, Lila came home early. She found him on the balcony reading. She slipped behind him, wrapped her arms around his chest. "I saw your name on the hospital donor wall today," she whispered. "Anonymous donation, huh?" He smiled, funny. "How your ward's getting a full remodel. You're impossible." Maybe she pulled away to sit beside him. "I don't need you to rescue me, you know." "I know," he said. "I never did. But I needed to see what it looked like when someone stopped trying to be strong. All the time." Lila rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to sleep on a park bench," she murmured. "And I used to think I had everything," David said. She looked up at him, eyes soft. "And now?" He smiled. "Now I know better."